this is screwed, well the seals are anyway, so that's another job to add to the list. I've decided to take this slave cylinder off now while I'm here, might as well, and then I can basically judge whether I can rebuild the slave, or the seals, or just buy a new one. Okay, well this is going to be the moment of truth. Taking this out and hoping the pushrod doesn't come out as well. I don't worry about it on my other Defender because I've put a cable tie in, cable tied the clip on when I replaced the clutch, but I've never had this one out before, and you don't know what the state of it is, so you hope. Oh, this is so nerve-wracking. If this goes wrong, then I've got to take the engine out. Let's try and ease it. Because what I've seen before is the pushrod gets really rough and the boot won't come off. Let's ease nice and gently. Come on. Come on. Oh, you beauty. Oh, you beauty. This is all the fluid that came out. You can see this is the stuff that I've been flushing through. This wasn't the first flush. This was the second flush I've been flushing through. And then when I decided that I was going to empty the whole thing and take the slave cylinder off, this is what came through at the end. So pretty gunky, crappy stuff. And there it is. And that's probably what's been making it pretty rough, because it's fairly rusty in there. When I took the piston out, it was right at the bottom. So this slave cylinder, there's a massive ridge. And the fact that this wasn't pushing up is quite telling, actually. So I've decided to replace it. There's quite a lot of scuffing along here as well. When you change this, you have to match the slave cylinder to the pushrod. And the changeover is a gearbox number. That doesn't help me whatsoever. For example, on my 97 Defender, it's got an Ashcroft replacement gearbox. The gearbox number doesn't mean anything, because the gearbox number in relating to these parts is a proxy for when it was built in production, and it's really the push rod and the slave cylinder that have to be matched. I could try and measure the push rod in the bell housing, but you're measuring kind of this much and you're not getting the last bit of the ball. And there's a lot of ambiguity around in the information related to push rods and their lengths, depending on the sources you read. So I've done a lot more research on push rods. I've actually found 6 different types of push rods for an R380 for a Defender. I'm going to go into it in a different video, but in essence, what you'll see is one push rod being FRC5417. That's for an LT77, and that is 91 millimeters long. So that's off here, okay? LT77 with different slave cylinder, okay? Next, we move to FTC3192. Sorry, FTC3912, that's 105 millimeters long, and that's with this slave cylinder 5072, FTC5072. And then we move to pushrod FTC5199, that's 99 millimeters, with a slave cylinder FTC5202. I'm going to compare these in a minute, it's quite interesting, the differences. But basically what we're having, that changeover happened with the gearbox number. That gearbox number is around about November 98. We're basically saying 300 TDIs in the UK is this setup, built in the factory, and TD5s is this setup. Except for the first kind of 3 months of TD5s that actually had the 300 TDI pushrod and slave cylinder. And this is what I'm expecting with mine with the 300T rest of the well-spec'd Defender. If you've got a Wolf, this only works for Suffix J gearboxes. If you've got a Suffix KRL gearbox and a Wolf, you've actually got different parts here, so don't pay attention to this. So what you really want to do is, you don't want to have to measure this, you want to look at the slave cylinder that came off and identify what is the slave cylinder part that you need to purchase. So I'm going to strip these down now and show you the differences. These two are basically identical. There's only 2 differences. The outer casing is completely identical. The only 2 differences that I've found, and bearing in mind these are TRW, but they're dimensionally, I'll first say dimensionally, these are identical to this one, which is the AP. So AP being the OEM. These are dimensionally the same. The casting is almost like for like, you know. The only difference being there's a slight difference in here by less than a millimeter in how proud This bit is from the wings here. First difference is these dust caps are different. The earlier one is a bit squarer, the later one is a bit more proud. The only other difference I found is the springs. Pistons are identical, absolutely identical. And I've looked at the piston with the AP one here. They are identical on the outside. The only difference is this one is 25mm deep. This one from TRW is 27mm deep. Other than that, they are dimensionally identical. So what that means is this spring is the one that means I can identify this as FTC5202. And these are so identical between TRW and AP that I'm confident that this is a good way of identifying it. The difference with the springs is quite telling. From the earlier one, the 300 TDI, yeah, that's like Zebedee. That is springy, that is. And this one from the TD5 era, that is really stiff. That is really, really stiff spring there. Basically a longer push rod with a softer spring to a shorter push rod with a stiffer spring. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. The later one with a stiffer spring, it wants to sit proud naturally. This one will basically sit anywhere you put it. You can just push it down. So very different. That's probably, you won't even have to disassemble. You can just tell if it's got a stiff spring or if it will sit wherever you put it. Anyway, that's how I think you tell clutch slave cylinders apart. It may not help you, you may just go off, you know, the expected part number. Helped me though, because I didn't know that this was necessarily the original slave cylinder. Because it's had an engine change, they probably would have changed the clutch, things like that. And it's the first time I'm doing it, so who knows what happened in the history of this vehicle. And it's rest of the world spec, so you've got to compare that. Is TD5 and 300 TDI actually the same through the course of history? Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.